again, we're talking about a 2020 vision, really a time to see us. And who's us? Us are folks who are historically, we may be asked to be at the table, but we are not at the head of the table. We may be asked our opinion, but we're not asked our opinion in a way we feel like if we take the time and the effort to really share our perspective, that it may impact the work or the project. And all three of us today who are presenting, our third presenter, and this is the work in the midst of everything else. Our third presenter, Pastor Daryl Brown, will be joining us shortly. I will be remiss to not speak of this. What we're talking about is being reflected in the streets with the young Black folks who are out here pushing and challenging communities for change. And for those who don't know, we are based in Omaha, Nebraska. And after George Floyd was murdered, there were protests in Omaha a week ago, and a young man named James Scurlock was murdered, 22 years old. And there was a bit of community unrest thereafter. And in addition to Daryl being an incredible adolescent health educator, he is the only Black queer pastor in the entire state of Nebraska. And Daryl was asked to preside over James's funeral this morning. So you'll see Daryl join us, but I just wanted to note, like, it's happening in real time, that the folks who are most impacted, the folks who are touching the streets, the folks who sit shoulder to shoulder with the folks that most community-based organizations or nonprofits are trying to serve, are the people who really need to be at the forefront. What we're gonna do now, we're gonna go over our presentation, our introduction slides for each of us. This is really interesting because not only are we colleagues, we're really best friends. And so it's interesting for us to do something like this because we've been talking about what we've been going through with these systems for 10, 15 years. And then it culminated with like a year hit when we all were leading our work in some way. And we were like, yo, how did this happen? Mm-hmm. And how do we clear the road for other people to where it doesn't seem so impossible, or how do we demystify it? Mm-hmm. So we're gonna each introduce ourselves. If Daryl isn't here in time, we'll tell you a little bit about Daryl because we'll probably gush on Daryl more than Daryl would ever gush on himself. And he needs to be gushed on because he's lit, truth be told. My name is Dominique Morgan. I am the executive director of Black and Pink. Black and Pink is the largest prison abolitionist organization in the United States, focusing on LGBTQ+ people and folks who are living with HIV and AIDS. I identify as a gender nonconforming Black, queer, formerly incarcerated person. I navigated the youth system from the age of 13 to 17. I was homeless for a year, and then I went into adult system from the age of 18 to 27. Much of my work is based on dismantling the systems that perpetuated violence, harm, and restriction on myself, be it from a space of sexual health. I previously was an adolescent health educator in the community here in Omaha, Nebraska. I'm a huge proponent that mass incarceration is a public health issue, and that until we designate it as such, we'll never have the funding or the community push to dismantle these systems. And it's just very important for me to weave all of the skills I've been blessed to receive into how we address the issues of people, especially Black folks, Black queer folks, being incarcerated. So today I'm really here to bring that perspective and the power of sexual health and the power of supporting folks navigating the lived experience of HIV and AIDS who are currently incarcerated and formerly incarcerated, and how that service will support them in being positioned to lead work. And I'll do that from my personal experience, and then I will do it from a perspective of implementing it as a program associate, as a health educator, and then now as an executive director of a national organization. You can look up anything about Black and Pink because maybe one of my board members is on this call and I don't want to get that email. You can look up what we do, who we are, and all that at www.blackandpink.org. There we go.
All right. Good afternoon, everybody. So my name is Tommy Young Dennis, and I'm a prevention and outreach specialist with the Nebraska AIDS Project. And I'm going to talk to you today just from the lived experience as someone who is currently living with HIV. I have been living with HIV for a decade now. At April 30th of this year, made 10 years for me. But really just talking about my lived experience as it pertains to just like overall here in Omaha, Nebraska. There was not a lot of representation, specifically when it came to Black gay men who were living with HIV. My agency historically has done a wonderful job with helping individuals who are living with HIV. But really what led me to my work was my diagnosis, and then also just noticing just the lack of representation. So for several years with my agency, I volunteered, was often invited to the table, invited to share my lived experience, but wasn't able, or I really didn't at the time, did not see a way to make that a career move, or really be one of the thought leaders, for HIV here in Nebraska. But then it kind of shifted for me about 3 years ago. The opportunity finally presented itself, and I was actually made a staff member at the Nebraska AIDS Project, where my primary responsibility was to build a sustainable program that focused on engagement and testing with Black, gay, and or bisexual identifying men. So that's just kind of a little bit about me. In addition to that, I also serve as a PrEP navigator, and also do a little bit of linkage to care as well.
Also, see, this is what I'm gonna do. For folks who are running agencies, for folks who are on staff, or for folks who are just like, yo, this really resonates because it's me and my friends, or me and my coworkers, or somebody I've been volunteering with, there is this thing where we really have to hype each other up, because it just is, because another byproduct of experiencing this system and your value and your importance being relegated to advisory committees or $10 gift cards for a sandwich, mm-hmm. or simply, being an outreach person that has none of the power of anyone with outreach and none of the benefits, is that you're not used to really talking about how incredible you are. Tommy was the face of HIV and AIDS in the state of Nebraska, period. Every run, every walk, every AIDS day, Tommy was on TV. Tommy was sharing his story. Tommy was an example of someone navigating the lived experience of HIV and AIDS with a partner. And Tommy and Deshawn did an incredible job of sharing they shared more than they ever had to share in order to create space for all of us to feel like what they had was possible, which was like healthy, thriving lives. Before PrEP on posters, before it was something pivotal in a state like Nebraska. And to be a Black person to do that, Tommy is one of the most powerful people I know. Not only that, doing work around the country to really push the education around HIV and AIDS. And I'm super proud for him to be the co-chair for our subgroup of HIV and AIDS for the National LGBT Working Group, because he brings an experience, and he brings an intellect, and he brings a level of professionalism that's really hard to grasp. And when I get enough money to hire him for real, Nebraska AIDS Project will be mad at me, and it's no shade, it's all love. Listen. So as we said, Daryl is completing the services for James Scurlock, and I'm gonna say James's name on this recording as many times as I can, because one, I believe there's power in speaking folks' names, and two, I want you all nationally to understand that Seeing us is not just about seeing us in a nonprofit or a corporation. Seeing us is not just about when we get professionalized enough for you to feel comfortable with seeing us, when we get the degree and title for us to be okay for you to hire us and give us a job. Seeing us is the 19-year-old kids who the ways that they want to be seen is they gonna shake the table and they're gonna push over the statue and they're gonna push it in the water. Like this is a wide breadth of understanding, and I think it's incredibly, there's a lot of synergy around the fact that this is also, June is also Pride Month, of course. And so many people try to rewrite history or minimize or edit literally what the Stonewall riots were. It wasn't handshaking. It wasn't doing the cha-cha slide with police officers in the streets. It were situations where folks were not being seen. Mm-hmm. Where folks were so angry at not being seen, the erasure was landing on their bodies in such a way that the only thing they felt like they could do is hit the streets and fight. And I think when you think of folks now in our communities who are doing work, many of you all probably know that person in your agency where there's this turmoil in them. You see them, they've come for appointments, you've got them linked to care, you've got them housing, so on and so forth, and there's just something brewing in them. And as a person who was that person, it's because we feel like we're not being seen. Portions of us are being seen based on who wants to see us at that time, because we also live in a culture where it takes a large amount of work to look at someone completely. Look at the wholeness of someone. We have to be very present to do that. And if you're a caseworker and you have 30 people, 40 people on your caseload, there are times when you feel like, well, I can only do this. Mm-hmm. And so that's another part that I just want us to think about. Daryl is currently an adolescent health educator at Pastor Daryl Brown is currently an adolescent health educator at Charles Drew Health Center. And he is also the pastor at Kingdom Builders. He is, do we use the term lead pastor or presiding? How does that
founding
work?
Pastor. Founding and senior pastor.
Founding and senior pastor, honey, for the Kojic folks on the live, honey. You forgive me because this girl didn't grow up in that structure. I know the Lord, but I didn't know the rules and regulations of navigating the Lord, huh? Pastor Dale Brown is founding and senior pastor at Kingdom Builders Christian Center here in Omaha, Nebraska as well. And as I mentioned before, as a Black queer man who's living with HIV, who has lived in their truth and written several books, I think it's really incredible the way that Daryl creates spaces, not only around your physical health, but your spiritual health. And this isn't about positioning any religion as the only way for people to navigate spiritual health, right? We know people do all sorts of things to align themselves. But I think there's power in bringing the conversation of like physical health and medication and having your checkups and all these things with checking up with yourself. And he has been in the clergy. I think Daryl's been since he was 13. 15. Daryl has been preaching. And he's like 80 now. So he's really, when he watches this back, he's going to get me. But at Charles Drew Health Center, Daryl oversees a lot of the work for the Adolescent Health Project, and they serve youth who are 15 to 24 in our community, mostly in the north side of Omaha, which is predominantly Black folks. So Daryl is doing the work of educating young people, usually educating their parents and sometimes their grandparents, because there is a separation of access to comprehensive sex education in Black communities, either by agencies offering it in a way that that lands as safe and accessible to Black folks, or due to perceptions within Black communities of what will access to comprehensive sex education position a child to do, so on and so forth. So Daryl carries a heavy workload in our community, and so appreciative of him. And again, when he gets here, he will join right in with us. For the Virgos in the room, this is your session overview. It's not as detailed as most Virgos would want it to be, because I'm a Pisces and it literally, it hurts my fingers to make PowerPoints. Thank God for Canva. I say. So we're gonna talk about what are your liberation practices. So we're talking about access to these opportunities lead to opportunities of liberation for folks that get access to these opportunities. And we're, again, in every portion of this session, we're going to speak from a personal perspective, and then we're going to talk about how this lives in an agency, right? So next, we're going to really have to have a conversation about, are you ready to not be necessary to the process? Many agencies, most work in our communities, and I'm a believer in the nonprofit industrial complex, and I'm a participant in the nonprofit industrial complex, right? And I'm constantly challenging myself, are we approaching work in a way to where, if we're doing it the way at a high level, we're consistent, that we as an agency may not be necessary in 10 years or 20 years? Is your agency doing that? And if you feel like it's too heavy for your agency to do that work, are you thinking about your succession strategy? Are you working for a community-based organization? You've been there for 20 years. Are you an ED and you've been there for 15 years? You've overseen 3 strategic plans. Why, right? I am in my 3rd year here at Black and Pink, and the moment I took the job, I'm like, who's next? So are you doing the work to make yourself unnecessary, which is an uncomfortable conversation, because we want to be necessary. In addition, many folks have gone to school for years and years and gotten degrees to do this work, and this is the way that you pay your bills. This is the way that you take care of your family. So that fear of uncertainty, if I'm not here, then how do I continue to thrive? How do I get access to liberation? And we're going to unpack that. Whose voice is heard? Again, how are people impacting the work that you do with their voice, their lived experience, and their entirety of self? How are you creating those spaces, and how are you showing them that they're heard? How are you really letting people know that they're important to the process? And then we're going to have a space for reflections and questions. That's where anything kind of we missed, we'll get into. And then, of course, we know that the chat box has been it's been cut, it's been disabled, and so at the end of the session, we'll go over all of the questions you all have. We normally would have a norm slide, but just for us, it's like, really ask us any question. That's our approach. That's not everyone's approach, but for us, it's any question, because I think this is really an important thing for us to get into, because I think the more that folks who are in agencies can understand how to dismantle the barriers for folks to overcome and either be a part of the agency or be an independent entity that can still affect change on an issue that's important to them. There's times that it feels uncomfortable to ask certain questions or to share certain concerns that you have. And so we want to make sure that you have that space. So it's really open. We don't have to do the one diva, one mic thing, because it's just us and we're all divas and we all have a me, praise be. And confidentiality in regards to on our end. If there's a question that's asked and we see it came from a specific person, we're not going to email your boss or something saying, oh my God, do you know what your staff member did? We, of course, understand we're being recorded and expect this to permeate portions of our community. That's our hope. So, but from you to us, respecting any questions that come up or because I don't know how we're going to see the names or if it's just going to be read from our moderator, but I want you all to understand that we will respect your confidentiality with your questions. And I think last but not least, be open. And be comfortable being uncomfortable. These conversations are not easy to have. What you're talking about 20, 25 years of folks navigating systems in a multitude of ways, to now be able to have a vantage point to say, okay, that moment from The Lion King when Mufasa takes Simba up there and like all of this land is yours.
Uh-huh.
We've had some moments like that with young queer Black folks over the last year where we've finally been able to say, yo, we climbed all the way up here.
Mm-hmm.
This is how you get up here, and all of this is yours. You feel me? And we've been able to have those conversations. So I really want y'all to be open and comfortable being uncomfortable. If it feels unsafe, and we don't dictate what unsafe feels, we're going to trust that you know what unsafe feels to you. If there's anybody that gets triggered by any of the personal information we share, anything, please do what you need to do for yourself. That's very important, because I think the only fear I have about this virtual world that we're kind of living in now is in a space I would be able to look at you in your face and I can kind of see body language and all those sort of things. We can't see you all. And as a person that's kind of more touch and does a lot of work based on empathy, the more that I can be close to a person, the more that I feel like I can show up for them. So I just want to say that I have to trust you to take care of yourself in this. Tommy, did I miss anything for norms?
You got it.
Boom. So our first section, what are your liberation practices? Now, when we say it's twofold, right? Because you are a person that is a part of the community. Most likely you sit on several boards, or most likely you sit on several committees, or you sit on hiring committees, or maybe you're an alumni of a university, so on and so forth. So you have you're influencing possibly your children around how they develop, your partner, your neighborhood, your church, right? Mm-hmm. So like, what are your liberation practice and how do you implement them like as yourself, as who you are? And then like, what are your liberation practices in regards to the organization that you're associated with, which can be two different things, right? And really, I really want to open up with grace of, I think we've all worked places where we were just like, yo, this isn't all the way I would like it to be, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, and I know some folks, I do some DEI work as well, where people are so afraid to talk about where the opportunity for growth is, and that's what I look at it as. It's not negatives, it's not weaknesses, it's where's the opportunity to grow in your agency. People are afraid to pinpoint it and discuss it because they think it frames them as bad folks or doing the work poorly. So you got two frameworks that we want you to think about with this question. So today, this was submitted originally as a panel discussion with the three of us and really just kind of talking about our experience and going through it. And we felt as though it would still be successful using that approach virtually. Mm-hmm. We didn't want to inundate you with a bunch of slides. Yeah. We didn't want to put a bunch of videos and a bunch of citations and things in here. It's like, let's talk about it. Let's get into it.
Just have a conversation.
Period. Your experts, your citations are sitting in front of you, beloved. So take notes. If you don't have a pen, I'm gonna give you 30 seconds to go grab a pen. Yes, you go get a pen. You still ain't went and got that pen yet?
Child, just open up your notepad.
My God.
Child,
okay.
Just start typing.
Boom. So either you're typing or you've got a pen at this point. So what are your liberation practice? What does liberation look like in collaborative spaces? So collaborative spaces. So liberation, many people frame liberation from an individual perspective, right? But I have a belief that no one person can get access to liberation if we all don't have and I'm talking about all, real, true access to liberation if we all don't have access to it. Mm-hmm. So we use that collaborative question first to really challenge how we've seen that and how we've tried to adapt our work around liberating ourselves, liberating our people when we've had to sit down and there's been 5 different ideas of what liberation means and what is the road to liberation. I know Tommy, like you, really at NAP, it's really collaborative with all of the case managers. Not only that, NAP is incredible at, again, this is the yes and of it all, is they are incredible at engaging volunteers and people in the community, and training them to be test for HIV, and training them to go out and spread information about the services that NAP has to offer. So as a person who's been in your role for the time you've been in your role, but also you low-key been working for NAP for, you know what I'm saying, for a decade, right? So like, can you talk about that a bit of like feeling like I have these answers based on what I've seen and what I've learned in the classroom, what I've learned in rooms all across the country doing the work, and then what I know is the answer based on the day I walked in and I was applying for services here, and what can that feel like?
So, when I think about liberation, I think about freedom, and I think about my path to get there. And one thing that I will say about my journey is that I think I started off wanting to feel free. I wanted to feel liberated because an HIV diagnosis definitely can at times make you feel as if you're shackled, so to speak, or that that you're bogged down. So for me, like, liberation on a personal level started when I decided to come forth with my story. And the reason why I decided to do that was because I had this thing where I like to get in front of things rather than, be reactive. Once, the news found, someone would find out about my status. So I wanted to start there. And I truly challenged myself. Okay, once I was able to share my story, or once I went public with my story, then what was next? And then from there, it was the volunteering, and then it was the plugging myself to media outlets, and then eventually it led to the job. But when it comes to liberation for someone that's living with HIV, I automatically think about the things that are often barriers for people who are living with HIV. So the housing, the employment, the pay, because let's be real, insurance is shitty and medications are expensive. And not everyone has that access to Ryan White services. And the Ryan White services are typically very generous, I'll say, but that's not everybody's story. So everybody does not have access to it. So when I think about the liberation that goes on in my day-to-day job, it's really just about tearing down those barriers, really promoting partnership within my agency with case managers, with community members, really. That's what liberation looks like.
I think of collaborative spaces is kind of, it's so varied for me because all of my friends do the work in different ways. So I felt like I was challenged early because I'm like, these are the people I love. These are the people that 9 times out of 10, honey, we agree on everything, but it's like, oh, but this approach, we really don't see it this way. Like one of our, and we were like a family. It's like 8 of us in our group chat, 8 or 9 of us in our group chat. And so we're sister brothers family. So when I say that, that's what I'm meaning. And one of our sisters, she works in politics, and she is a dynamo, a superwoman in politics. There takes a certain way to approach things when you are a leader in politics that feels awkward if you're used to activism and taking it to the streets in a way that doesn't feel the way that politics can feel, right? And so there's been plenty of times where we've been like, I disagree. Or even the conversation of abolition. As an abolitionist, there are heavy conversations that we have to have around harm that happens to children and murder and all these other things. And it taught me that it's not about them agreeing with me. It's not about them convincing me to agree with them. Mm-hmm. It's about us seeing all of our approaches as viable, as long as it's based in respect and as long as it's based in the goodness, the best for our community and our people. Mm-hmm. And there was something that I came to a while ago. I'm a visual person, and these issues that we're addressing, whether it's HIV and AIDS, whether it's poverty, whether it's mass incarceration, in my mind visually, it's like a big boulder on the side of a mountain, right? Mm-hmm. And many people, when you get positioned to be leaders or do this work, it'll be one person holding up the rock. And at the bottom of the mountain is a town that you're trying to prevent from the rock. So the rock in this conversation is the issue. Mm-hmm. The mountain and the steepness of the mountain is your organization, is your journey to be able to push back on the issues. And the city below is the community that you're serving, or the people who have been impacted by the issue that you're trying to support in thriving through that experience, right? Mm-hmm. And when you're like the one person there with the boulder, it's like the most you can do is make sure that it doesn't go any further down the hill. That's the most you can do. And I was watching, I think I was watching that Superman, that Man of Steel movie. And I was watching him kind of trying to lift a mountain. I was just like, Superman struggles to lift a mountain. And it's like, how do we as people think that we can be the only folks who can push the boulder to where it's not only not harming the folks below, but we're able to push it to the other side of the mountain where, it goes in the water and it's not going to impact anyone's lived experience. Mm-hmm. And then I realized that I can either take the approach to where I stand there behind the rock myself, or I can take the approach of I can get as many people with me and as many people I can be with, because it's not just about me leading and people like following behind me. We can come together. And imagine if there's 20 hands on the rock. Imagine if there are 60 and 80 hands on the rock. That not only will I be able to hold the rock in place, mm-hmm. I'll be able to push it over to the other side, and we'll be able to move past that issue. And people are going to come to that rock with different ideas about how we keep the rock up, right? Some people are going to want to make a pulley system. Mm-hmm. Some people, there's all these, anyone who's ever moved, right? Mm-hmm. You pull up and you get your friends to come, and it's like everybody has 20 ways that they feel like the boxes can fit in the van. Mm-hmm. Everybody has 20 ways that they pack things, right? And it's just like the first step in engaging in liberation practices that are collaborative is letting go of your belief that your answer is the only answer. Mm-hmm. That people should just be working to support your answer coming to fruition, or people need to be excited about your answer. From a classroom compsex ed perspective, it's like a love language piece. You know what I mean? It's just like what you're offering may not always be the thing that speaks to people, but that doesn't mean that what you're offering doesn't have value. And many times we get discouraged when liberation practices are trying to be engaged in a collaborative way, because it feels like, oh, I done said this, I thought this was the most lit thing ever, and you ain't getting your life. Mm-hmm. And we get discouraged, or we pull back, or we shut down, or we feel like we have to be a Lone Ranger. I feel like the reason we have so many doggone nonprofits in this community is because somebody had what they believe to be an answer for a situation with who they tried to collaborate with, or maybe the agency they were in and didn't feel like it fit. And it's like, I need to go get an EIN. I need to start my own agency. Mm-hmm. And we've all seen nonprofits that have floundered because you focus on one issue from one approach, and where's the longevity in it, right? I think longevity also comes from collaborative work. Mm-hmm. At Black and Pink, we are a chapter-based agency. So not only do I have a staff of 11 that influence our work, that push back on me, that challenge me when I have an approach. I have a strong board, and then we have chapters across the country. We have about 13 chapters across the country of folks who, baby, those chapter members will snap their wrist trying to send me an email about something they seen I said they did, you know what I'm saying? And I receive it because it's like, okay, this is dope, they're engaged. Mm-hmm. And then past the chapter members, we have 22,000 currently incarcerated people who influence our work. We have something called the Black and Pink newsletter, and there have been some major decisions in our agency that we have not went forward with until members who are currently incarcerated have had the opportunity to give us feedback, to push back on our idea, or to engage in helping us make it better. And when we do that, we compensate them. When we do that, we compensate them, right? And that's very important to me because I'm asking for your lived experience, right? Before I was able to get my undergrad, I had 10 years of lived experience of navigating the system. So for me, that's a PhD in mass incarceration. Mm-hmm. So when you ask me questions about the prison industrial complex, you want to tap into my PhD, right? And I don't know anybody who's busted their butt for a PhD. Shout out to my sis Tunette Powell, who just graduated from UC, Dr. Tunette Powell, that just graduated from UCLA. And they don't expect a coin for such. Mm-hmm. So when we are having the privilege to get feedback and get and be influenced by currently incarcerated folks who are in real time navigating it, of course they deserve compensation. So I think the collaborative piece, it's not to say that you're not the answer. It's you have to believe that you're not the only answer. And you have to believe it. It can't be performative. It can't be, I'm going to keep it cute while we're at this table and having this conversation. You really have to believe you're not the answer, because that is the only way that when another option is shared with you, you really are open to it and you can get behind that. We've all been around folks who've been like, okay, let's do that. And you've watched them not really want to do it. Mm-hmm. And you've watched them not show up, mm-hmm. not be involved. Mm-hmm. And that's harmful and toxic as well. Yeah. I think that toxicity of, especially if you're in leadership and you are engaging in work around liberation and you're telling folks you want to collaborate with them, there is this perception that that you really don't want their feedback, that you just want them to say yes, So as leaders, whatever leader means to you and however you're approaching this, you need to be very explicit in saying, I want to be challenged. I think this is great, mm-hmm. but do y'all think this is great? Why don't you think this is great? If you think it is great, why do you think it's great? What could we improve on? What part of this excites you? What part of this would you want to hold if we were choosing this plan? All these questions that I ask constantly as an executive director of a national agency. Again, that it would be so easy for me to be like, you know what? I made a decision. I'm gonna do what I want to do. But where's the longevity in the answer? Where's the buy-in from the people I'm serving, the people that I work with, to really see it as an answer as well? And I believe there's power in collaboration. The fifth season of She-Ra is up on Netflix now. If you haven't watched it, bless yourself. And I'm a kid of the 80s, so I remember the She-Ra back in the day, right? And She-Ra was framed as the most powerful person in the show. Mm-hmm. And this new series came and I'm like, child, what is this? This ain't my She-Ra. Because from the start, it's She-Ra and the princesses of power. And I was like, that's different. And then I watch, and every princess is just as powerful as She-Ra. Mm-hmm. And then She-Ra is literally at her most powerful in this new series when she's working in collaboration with the other princesses. And I was watching the other night thinking about our slides, and I was like, okay, this is deep. You can be powerful on your own, but it's a whole nother level of power where you can be powerful with other powerful people.
Absolutely.
And I believe, for me, liberation, power is tied into liberation, and that's important. The next part is, what are known and unknown barriers for system-impacted people in your agency? There are many people who are like, oh, we removed the box asking about criminal records. There are many people who have said, you know, oh, we're open to anyone working for us, all these things. But I look at their leadership, I look at their website, I look at their hiring process, I look at their HR department and the education their HR department has around bias and a lens of white supremacy and a lens of whiteness when approaching the work. I look at the language you use on the application or on the LinkedIn post to get people to apply. I look at the ways that you allow people to show you that they are the right person for the work. All those things, whether they be small or large, when you're a system-impacted people and repeatedly you've been told, and then you reach a moment when you accept the fact that you can't have certain things, those both spoken and unspoken things make us give up or make us turn away or make us not try at all. And in this sense, we're talking about, I was talking about more incarceration, but we use the term system impacted here at Black and Pink because I believe that systems of oppression align, and there's something when these systems of oppression align that position you to be in the prison industrial complex.
Absolutely.
And therefore, I believe if I can do the work to dismantle these systems before they coalesce in a way that positions you to be to be impacted by mass incarceration, then we're really doing preventative work to address the prison industrial complex. So system impacted are folks who have navigated poverty and couldn't afford to go to school, or people who are in school and their grades aren't the best because they, like myself, are living with ADHD. People who could be living with HIV and AIDS, and you physically maybe can't go to school. For the people who have chronic health issues, and maybe you really are a great worker, but you're the best worker if you could work from home. It was interesting to watch our community within 2 weeks. Folks who could never do their jobs from home before, in 2 weeks it was possible. And so me and my friends who navigate lived experience of any disability and any barriers, I watched them share how they had been asking for this for years. I've applied for this job. I have all of these degrees, but I need to be able to work from home. And they told me no. So Tommy, when from that lens of system impacted, what are some of the things that you felt like really prevented you from the opportunities that you have been talking about for a while, and then what shifted for you to be able to access the opportunity that you have now at Nebraska AIDS Project, and how are you looking forward to the next opportunities, and what barriers are you seeing out there that you feel like you may have to overcome or engage in work to dismantle?
I mean, the biggest thing, of course, is education background. And I'm super forthcoming. I have yet to finish a traditional degree. And prior to being brought on at the Nebraska AIDS Project, I really just did not see a way for me to be thoroughly engaged in the work, and then also being compensated appropriately. And, to Dominique's point, a little $10 gift card, $50 gift card, a sandwich, that's cute, but it's not paying my rent. That's not paying my car note. So that was probably the biggest barrier that I see, or that was placed in front of me. And, being super transparent, I was actually in school when I was diagnosed, but because of, you know, the ups and downs with my health at the time, and then just trying to navigate mentally. There was just I just did not see a way for that to happen. And at the time, I did not see my lived experience as, I guess, valuable. It was valuable, but it wasn't as valuable as a 4-year degree. So I just didn't see, honestly, I was just like comfortable. I was complacent with continuing on the way that things had been. Hey, Tommy, do you want to come sit at this table, give us a few thoughts, and then that's pretty much it. Truly, like, all that shifted. I think I had actually reached out to the Nebraska AIDS Project one day for something, and my boss used to be my case manager, and she asked me would I be interested in applying for the position, and I was just like, I was like, I'm gonna apply, and y'all gonna tell me no because I don't have a degree. And that's what y'all always look for. That's the first thing that I always see on the application is, do you have a bachelor's degree or do you have a 4-year degree or whatever the case might be? But I gave it a shot. And really, like, the hiring process was real quick. Like, I interviewed, they took 2 weeks, got me back. And at the time I was working for a corporation, and then they offered me more than what I was making at the corporation. And then that's truly when the shift began. Like, and I had an open and honest conversation with my boss about the things that I had spent the last, at the time, 7 years, just kind of from the client's perspective, looking around the agency and just seeing where my input could be valuable. And then being brought into that position where I was charged to pretty much build a whole program from the ground up. Like, the fact that I was able to do that, I think that's when I really started to see the power in my voice, and I started to feel less tokenized. I still felt tokenized, but to a lesser degree, I guess, if you know. And I think that's truly, like, when the shift started to occur, when I really started to see, like, power in my voice and in my lived experience.
I mean, that's one of the saddest things that the system does, is that it makes us doubt ourselves. It makes us say, oh, can I really do this? Mm-hmm. And it's no shade. It's no shade at all. But I remember sitting in classes and I'm like, I know this already. Who doesn't know this? Like these moments of lived experience matters because you've survived it, you've done the work. The technical skill that they offer you in classrooms, often it's, you've already figured that out because you had to make it, right? Mm-hmm. And what historically has happened for me is that in spaces of education, I just usually get the professional term for what I already know is true, or for something I've already been doing. For example, like, I came from a space, like, as a kid navigating foster care and group homes, as a Black queer child navigating, like, all, like, white probation officers and all these things, how to have a conversation with someone and really suss out what they wanted and really get to meat of the matter without feeling like I was exerting power over them, mm-hmm. or like I was trying to manipulate them, right? How do I have this engaging conversation? I'm working at Charles Drew Health Center as an adolescent health educator, and they're like, we're gonna go into this program. You're all gonna get trained on motivational interviewing. I'm like, okay, this has to be something that's just gonna shake the table. This is innovative, honey, because they want me on calls for 3 hours at a time, 4 months on end. And I sit and the opening session was in person, and I'm sitting there and I'm like, oh, this is the thing that I have to do with white men to convince them that my idea is the right idea, but I also don't want to scare them or offend them. Oh, that's what that is.
Mhm.
I was like, oh, yeah, I've been doing this, but now I know it's called motivational interviewing. Thank you. So I often ask myself, how can I validate the lived experience and the power of what people learn through lived experience without forcing them inside of a classroom, right? Now, if you're like education, degrees, like this is what I want to, because now I'm in a place where that's a desire I have. Like it's really full circle because I wanted to be in this work. It was last September that I was diagnosed with ADHD. And I always saw myself as someone who didn't learn well. Like I was like, I can't remember, like I've been going through in my mind, like first grade, I'm like, when did I feel like I stopped really enjoying learning? Always identified as smart, always high scores on tests, to the point where I was always in trouble because people felt like, well, why aren't they engaging? What's happening? And of course, because I can't mentally focus, because I couldn't read a whole page without my brain going somewhere else, I engaged in a lot of behavior in classrooms because I wasn't occupied with anything else. And I was instantly categorized as just a bad kid, right? And so I started off as the entertainment chair for Pride here in Nebraska. I didn't know Robert's rules of orders from Robert. You know what I mean? Then I became, I was over scholarships at Pride here in Nebraska. Then I became the vice president. And during my time as vice president, I created Youth Pride here in Nebraska. And this will be our 6th year of Youth Pride, Corona or not, honey. We will have that space for our babies. That is one of the few Youth Prides in the country that goes on. I founded that. I founded our scholarship program and facilitated that work. And then I became the president. I was the first Black vice president and the first Black president of Pride here in Nebraska. And at this time I left prison with an associate's degree in culinary management because I was like, I need to be able to make money. And I grew up, my father said that if you can feed people or if you can take care of sick people, you'll always have a job. Blood and things are not my ministry. So I was like, okay, I'll see if I can learn how to cook. And it was one of the few actual degrees they offered in prison. And so when I left, it was like, I'm gonna run restaurants. I'm single, I don't have any children in Nebraska. If you're making, I think that they say if you're making $12 an hour, $13 an hour, like your medium income, I'm like, okay, if I can one day get a job where I'm making $40,000 a year, I'm gonna be fine. Maybe go on a vacation once a year, get a car that is like somewhat decent that I can get around in, give me a little apartment, get it decorated, I'm fine. Like that was my glass ceiling. Not my glass ceiling, that was my ceiling. That was the high rise. That was my belief, right? And getting into working, volunteering opened my mind, but I'm like, I'm volunteering, I'm running whole agencies, you know, but I can't get a job anywhere. Like nobody's even gonna look at my application. I'm sitting on all these committees. I'm helping organizations facilitate programs and all these things. And I'm just like, the people who are sitting at the table, who are asking me all these questions are the people who are on the clock, who are getting benefits, who are making an income from this. And I am the expert, and that's why they have me there, but I'm not good enough to be hired. And it used to really bother me. And I got in a point where I was jealous. I think envy and jealousy are two different things. Right. And I also was consistently ashamed because I felt like I wasn't good enough. And so in that shame, I started taking classes online and didn't tell a soul. Because one, I didn't believe that I would be able to graduate. Two, I was afraid that, well, the truth is, if I can get a job and they hire me without a degree, I'm quitting. I am only going to school to get this degree so I get a job. Like, I do not want to do this. So if in the process, honey, I get a position where I remember I made a Facebook post. I was like, I'll serve the coffee, period. Because I was running a nonprofit as the president of Pride. I was catering for a company. I would be taking off work to go do Pride stuff. And then I was running and catering out of my own home. And I remember there was a time that I was like, my lights were about to be shut off. My water was going to be shut off. And I'm like, I'm taking off work to go facilitate this Pride meeting because that was my thing. I'm like, I'm putting in 40 hours a week at this. And so I ended up graduating with my undergrad from Southern New Hampshire University in May of 2016 and didn't tell anyone because even then it was like, well, I graduated from school online. That's not really anything. I just need to get the paper, you know. But I share all that because what are the known and unknown barriers for system impacted people in your agency? Almost a decade ago, Ann Smolsky, who is the director of Extension Services, now that's her current title at Charles Drew Health Center, she worked in homeless services for Nebraska AIDS Project and Together Inc. And I was released from prison on February 16, 2009. My mother died December 23rd, 2009, and I adopted my 12-year-old sister. So I'm learning how to be an adult, and then I'm trying to be a parent. Barely making it, need to go and get energy assistance. I go down there and walks me through the whole process, you know, save my lights. My sister has asthma, and in the summertime, I used to be very afraid of not being able to afford the air for her. And after that, Ann and I were in the same circles, right? And it's that very weird, when we think about solidarity, right? You have to get to know people, you have to care about people's wants, but there's a lot of unwritten and written rules around if you work for the agency and you start to build friendships with people who we've served, is it appropriate or is it not? And we were friends, you know, coming to Pride, you know what I'm saying? Social media, Facebook, all those things. And I had about 6 months left of school and I had applied for an arts nonprofit because I'm also a musician to run their social media and their marketing. I got hired and they weren't really paying me anything really. I was part-time. They hired me as the marketing director, but it was a start. And I was like, I'll take it. I think they're paying like $20 an hour and I was only being paid monthly. I had to submit invoices. It was a lot of foolishness. But I was like, I got the job. I'm happy. Like, okay, I'm on the way, right? They looked up my past and I had been hired, I had been working, and the board got together overnight and I woke up to a letter letting me know I was terminated. Go back to working in restaurants. I was able to get a job with the DCCC working for a congressman's re-election campaign, being the constituency director for North Omaha. But I lied the whole interview. At the time, I had never voted because I had lost my voting rights. I had never voted. I didn't have the degree. I was in school, but I told them I had the degree, and I had never done that work. I got hired, and I think I was making $24 an hour. And baby, when I tell you, when I called my therapist, and I was like, I made it. Like I was like, okay, this is it. I'm good. Still doing all this volunteer community work, and ended up working part-time for a social justice agency. I think I was making $12 an hour there, still no degree. And hits me up and she's like, let's go to lunch. And I don't know how many times has someone hit you up, be like, I want to have lunch with you. I want to bend your ear. Like how many times, you know what I mean, right?
I lost count.
So I was just like, okay, it's Ann, I'm gonna go, it's Ann. I mess with Ann, she my people, cool. It's a free meal, because I'm struggling. We go, we have the meal, and she's like, hey, I'm gonna be hiring for these jobs. Do you want to do this work? And I'm like, me? She said, guess you. I had been given so many promises. Oh God, I will not get emotional right now. I had been given so many promises, and I had seen so many opportunities kind of put in front of me and snatched away from me. I didn't want to believe it.
Right.
I did not allow myself to get excited. I'm like, okay, bro. And that was early May. Graduated at the end of May. I went in for my interview at Charles Drew on it was like June 18th. And she had me apply, and I remember I have the email still where I emailed her like, do they know who I am? Do they know what's gonna come up? Because I still had to do the background check. I still had to pay, working for a federally qualified health center. I had to go through the registries around harm of adults and young children and all those things. I'm like, do they know what, like, is this a setup?
Right.
Get into the interview. It's Ann, the director of HR. Usually that's like your last interview with the person who's going to supervise you. And usually you have a team member, but in this instance, I was going to be the first team member on the Adolescent Health Project. And I remember being so nervous. I had to be at my server job in an hour. So my bottoms and my shoes were my server clothes, but I had on a different shirt. And I knew that I would have to change while I was driving my car to get to my other job. And I was in the interview. I'm looking at Ann, I'm scared, hands wet. And I leave, and I'm driving here in Omaha, and we have a street that's like goes up all the way through our city. I'm driving up Dodge, and it's been 10 minutes, and I'm literally like changing my shirt, and I get a call, and I'm like, God, this looks like an old school number. This must be Charles Drew. And HR offers, would you like the job? And I screamed yes, and hung up. And then she called me back and said, well, do you want to know how much we're going to pay you? I'm like, oh, I mean, yeah. And I started off at Charles Drew at $42,000 a year, full benefits, 401k, life insurance. And I was like, this is it. I've made it. It was another time when I was like, I don't want any more, Lord. I've tempted you enough. Thank you. Started at Charles Drew, and in the first 2 weeks I hid in my office because I was afraid if they saw me walking the hallways that someone would recognize they made a mistake and they would fire me. So I literally hid it. I was like, at least if I stay here a week, 2 weeks, I'll get a check. Like if I make it. Like literally would not leave my office. The nurses there that are still there now can tell you how I would hide in my office and be afraid to come out and all those things. I was at Charles Drew for a year before I was offered this position at Black and Pink that I then turned down because I was like, I'm not ready to be an executive director. I'm just now learning this. And ended up, 6 months later being the ED. And I worked at Charles Drew and Black and Pink at the same time for a year because I was afraid, because the system had made me not trust possibilities. So when you're looking at the known and the unknown in your organization that can be barriers, even if that person isn't the person for your agency, let it be because they're not the right fit. Let that be the reason. Now that's fair. Some people are like dope folks. I have friends that, honey, I laugh with and love to be with all day. I wouldn't hire them. Not because they're not skilled, because they're not the right fit, right? Right. And so let that be the reason. Let the vetting process have happened. Let them have shown you who they are, what they're passionate about, and then say, this isn't really the person that we're looking for to fill this role. And that's fair. I'm comfortable with that. I'm not comfortable with the number of people who have been impacted by systems who don't believe that there is any opportunity for them outside of the opportunities that are historically given to system impacted people, working in food service, working in restaurants, being in positions where you are not leading, or you're not leading and being paid the appropriate wage a leader should be. Absolutely. So that was huge for us. Is that liberation from a collaborative standpoint has to be about you putting your answer to the side and look through look through your equal opportunity employment language in your organization. Go to LinkedIn, go to any places you all have put job postings. If you're looking at it from a lens of someone who knows that maybe they're not bringing all the things to the table in the way that this is laid out, what could be a barrier? Mm-hmm. If you know internally that yes, we're asking for a degree, but we'll take 4 years of work experience, mm-hmm. express that.
Absolutely.
And this isn't so much about when we see us, but since we're on the topic, stop posting jobs and not putting the salary on there.
Please, please.
Quit wasting people's time. Blessings.
So we getting close on time.
Okay.
I think. We're
getting close. Daryl is still at the cemetery. So this conversation of, are you ready to be necessary? Is your work centered around eradicating the issue? So like, are you doing the work in order to dismantle the issue? You can be doing great work serving people, but the people aren't the system and the issue, right? So that's, again, multiple answers are important. Mm-hmm. Some people are like, we serve the people. Mm-hmm. Some entities need to address the systems that are affecting the people you're serving. And doing that work, and you can do both of those approaches can be done with the spirit of dismantling. If you're serving someone, how are you making sure that they have access, that they have reach that's based in their autonomy and their choice and prepares them for their independence and their liberation? If you're doing work to dismantle systems, how are you making sure that that system, one, isn't necessary for the person to get access to relief? And two, if that system is perpetuating harm, how do you impede that process? If the issue is too big, are you at least doing it on an individual level with your clients or as a person? Let's say you're working in poverty. Let's say you're working around HIV and AIDS, right? These huge, huge issues. Mm-hmm. I know that's not easy, but it starts with literally what's your approach when a client walks in your office? How are your chairs set up when a person comes sits at your desk? What are the colors in the space? What are the sounds? Mm-hmm. When you're building their case management plan, I had so many case files and so many plans that I had never laid my eyes on, but it was my responsibility as the client to achieve these goals. Mm-hmm. Hadn't made none of the goals, hadn't written them down, hadn't seen where they existed, but I was being judged based on said goals. So it's something as small as that, where you can engage in respecting the power and autonomy of the people that you're working with. If you don't want to go on a micro level of individuals, this also is for the folks who, when you have white folks historically who go into Black and brown communities and they want to offer the solution and they want to do work in a fashion of, oh, you just don't know any better, let us teach you. Mm. The answers live in community.
Absolutely.
Communities that experience harm, communities that are most impacted, they know what they need. The issue is that because of who they are, because of how they look, because of the access they have, their voice doesn't matter. So as an agency, one of my large goals is to do the work in a way where I'm not speaking for people. If I can't get these people in front of who needs to hear them, I'm amplifying it. But speaking for people isn't possible. That whole unnecessary piece, the fear of not being needed, the fear of not being a part of what's happening. Mm-hmm. Have you seen that, or have you ever thought about that yourself? Like, if my work isn't this anymore, like, what do I do next?
Absolutely. Like that, honestly, I've been at the agency for 3 years, and that honestly was a very real fear of mine up until 7 months ago. And that's just me being real. Like, I was just like, what's next? Like, I've scratched, I've clawed, and I finally got this nice position that's paying me a cute little coin, and but like, what if I become unnecessary, or what if they stop seeing my value? And then I had to kind of take a step back, and I was just like, before you, nobody black that also identified as gay was doing the work. And so you shouldn't get in this position to where you feel like this is it. This is your glass ceiling. So I'll absolutely say that, like, now I do see an end, even though I feel like HIV is too big of an issue. But no one who is engaged in this work should get into the work with the intention of taking up space. You should always be making room for other voices, other people to fill your role, to take it to the next level, and that's exactly what I'm doing. I don't want to be in my position forever. I definitely don't see myself as a lifer, if you will, at the Nebraska AIDS Project, and that's just me being real. And I might even have some people that I work with that are on this. Yeah, I said it, whatever. I don't see myself being a lifer. I want to work myself out of a job, but does me working myself out of a job, does that mean that the work stops? No, the work doesn't stop. It just means that it's not a good fit for me in this position, in this role. I'm working my way up, and then in the meantime, I'm working to create that space for the next Tommy, or the next Dominique, or whatever. I'm uplifting the next voice, because there is validity in having different voices in different positions at the table.
I think it's just really important to always be thinking about, when is my time to go? Because if you're not clear of when that is, it'll hop up on you. Mm-hmm. From an executive director position, if you're leading the agency, if you're in charge of creating the culture of the agency, and this isn't a business, a for-profit business, right? This is owned by the community. It's owned by the board, all those things. It's like, I get concerned of how you can be the ED for 20 years and everything doesn't reflect you, because you've been involved in everything. So it's like, I'm always like, when is it time for me to go? And not only time to go, but what do I want to go to? And what are my benchmarks for me being successful here? Mm-hmm. I think oftentimes we do this work, and it's like, because these issues seem so large, because these issues seem so overwhelming, we don't want to set personal goals. I'm not talking about your grant goals. I'm not talking about your evaluation, your supervision goals. I'm saying, what do you want to do? They already been told that you're going to slide on in. What do you want to do? What pastor has joined us? Amen. What do you want to do that lets you know, like, oh, I hit this. It's time for me to mosey on down the road. You know what I'm saying? What is that song? Know when to hold them, know when to fold them. Is that what the people said? Huh? Oh, yes. My God. So that whole unnecessary piece, being unnecessary, is really important. And whose voice is heard, and are you listening? Are you uplifting the voices of the most impacted, and are those voices being tokenized? Uplifting the voices of those most impacted, we can get into that, but I really think with to make sure that we have time for questions, that tokenized piece, so many people don't know how to engage in voice without further oppressing the people that they're trying to get voice from. So one of the most damaging things that I experience is when I'm brought into a space and I have to speak for every Black person. Or I'm brought into a place and it's like, okay, what do queer people want, Dominique? What do Black queer people want? What do gender, like these questions where it's like, I can only tell you what speaks to me, mm-hmm. right? Now I can send a quick text to about 10 people and I can get a little tea and feedback, mm-hmm. but still, honey, that's 10 people versus this huge population of folks you want to serve. And I think that really comes from people want an answer and they want an answer quickly so they can say they've done something quickly. Mm-hmm. And going back to the first slide around liberation and doing liberation work from a collaborative perspective, when you collaborate, it's inherently going to take more time. And when you're collaborating with folks who have opinions, mm-hmm. who want to be heard, it's going to take even more time because they have something valuable to offer. So you got to sift through that, and y'all got to do the work. I was watching this. It's a show called Songland on NBC, where these songwriters go. It's like American Idol for songwriters, and it was the finale, right? Mm-hmm. And it was 3 judges, and that the singer Bebe Rexha, she was going to choose a song that she was going to sing at the Olympics, and it was 3 people, and she loved 2 of the songs. And they all went off and they started, she was talking to the other songwriters, it's Esther Dean, huge people who've written huge songs. And she sings the chorus of one of the songs, and then she sings the hook of the other song. And she puts the song together, and for the first time, they had 2 people win because the strongest song was the song with parts of both of them, right? Mm-hmm. And I said, ooh, look, you know, I just got chills just then. Also, the anointing. But I was like, yo, that's what it is. It's like, and both of the songs individually were dope, but when she put them together, I said, okay, sis, you got something. Right. And so when we're talking about collaboration, when we're talking about making yourself unnecessary, when we're talking about making sure you're not tokenizing folks and uplifting voices of the most impacted, you need to really see that a multitude of answers will make the answer. Absolutely. You need to see that a multitude of voices really are what voice is about. And you need to understand that you're not the be all end all. And I would challenge you to find peace in that, because once I realized that I'm not the answer, it took a lot of pressure of me feeling like I had to know everything. Mm-hmm. I was able to say, child, this is what I got to offer. Mm-hmm. Who else? Who can I bring around, right? Mm-hmm. And so as you all think about the process of bringing in voices, of elevating people through your agencies, if it's not the answer of agencies right now, because I know funding is scary, how are you engaging with folks that, again, respects their power, acknowledges their power, respects and acknowledges their autonomy, and they're able to dictate what does it mean to be a part. And I don't care how bad your budget is. If y'all don't keep some Visa gift cards around and quit giving people these $5 Gap cards and Subway cards, y'all need to get you a guild, get you somebody. Okay, so we got. So I think I'm going to get off of the screen share so we can see the questions. All right. Welcome, Daryl, to the space.
Hey, everybody.
Welcome.
Excuse my tardy.
So Val just said, kudos, appreciate our experience on a question. It was said, as a leader, do you have any advice on balancing gathering input and when it's time to take all the input and use it to make a choice? I would imagine there are many good ideas you gather that might at times be at odds. How do you communicate around decisions that might go against some individuals' ideas? For me, I recognize, and I tell folks, that's the dangerous part of me doing my work in that approach, because even if I do all that collaborative work, if it fails, it's on me. So that's the part where it's just like, I have to really have a belief in the value of this. And in that, I kind of know what I think can have impact, right? And I'm open to hearing things, and I'm also looking for other things that are like, oh, aha, this really speaks to me. As we've talked, if it's more about people critiquing my idea, then we go in and we clean that up. If it's a different idea, I'm like, well, how does this live? How can I make this happen? And sometimes it's like what I just said, where I take the 2 songs and I put them together and I make a one. But at the end of the day, oftentimes it has to be about my gut, because in my role, I'm accountable at the end of the day. And that's important, because what I'm never going to do is sit down with a bunch of people and have a conversation. If something goes wrong, come back and say, oh, well, it's y'all fault. Because that's the choice I made when I positioned myself in this role, right? And so for the EDs, for the managers, for the supervisors, when you're engaging in work around hearing voice, also still know that you still are the one that's most culpable. And it's dangerous and unfair that if the plan does not work, for you to come back to the people that you engage with and try to put it on them, because that will prevent them from ever sharing anything with you again.
In the process, silencing their voice.
silencing their, and it's low-key a toxic way to move. And so just, it's really that gut feeling, and hearing and listening and putting it out there and going forward. We did leave time for questions, Clyde. What is your suggestion to assist agencies in hiring more trans people? When we talk about system impacted people, especially, I know a lot of white trans folks that got jobs, Black trans folks, brown trans folks, trans folks of first generation trans folks. That's I can talk about that. I know white folks that done had jobs who are trans forever, working at universities, running agencies, all that. Folks who are folks of color, Black folks who are trans, gender nonconforming. Going back to what we were talking about, like how do you look at the barriers that are there and kind of like what could feel like a barrier, even if it doesn't look like a barrier to me. And then once you're getting them, and then even I know folks who have, I know large agencies who went to the conference, they've hired the Black trans girl, you're paying her a minimum salary, you send her to all the conferences to present, she's the outreach coordinator, she's doing all the work of working with her people who look just like her, right? She's doing energy assistance and handing out pantries, and she needs energy assistance and pantries herself. And then it's, she still feels like she's a client and working in the agency. And so I think looking at the practices that you have and being intentional about uplifting voices and uplifting from a space of power and not tokenizing, not, oh, let's go get a Black person to come work or a trans person to go work, but saying like, at Black and Pink, we intentionally hire formerly incarcerated system impacted people.
But then supporting them after they get in the role is so critical, I think, because so many times we get the person in the door because they fit the criteria of what we wanted to have in the door, but we don't support their development. We don't support their professional development. We expect them to just come into the role already knowing everything that they're supposed to know for the role. And yes, they may have a heart for the role, and yes, they may have the right skill set for the role, but that doesn't mean that skill set does not need to be fine-tuned and that some other things need to be poured into that individual. So supporting them in a way that helps them develop while they're in the position as well.
And what they feel like is development.
Right.
Exactly.
Well, I think one of the most pivotal things for me when I was at Charles Drew is I had a supervisor. She didn't come to me with conferences. My first major conference was Creating Change. And was like, okay, this is your budget. This is where you, I know too many folks who work in agencies that don't know their professional development budget. I know too many people who work in agencies and I'm like, hey, this is coming up. Like, what do you have left for professional development this year? And they're like, I don't know. Unacceptable. Because that's power in their autonomy. They're able to say, yo, you know, I kikied a little bit about motivational interviewing, but let's say like, look, I want to take this class. You know, one of my staff members who's not a manager wanted to take a management course. Okay. This is your money. This is us as an agency investing in you. Every investment in an employee who's working for an agency may not be because that investment is going to come back to your agency. It should be low-key, I'm invested in my people because my people are here. So I think it's really important, share that information, share budgets. People working on specific projects, share that information so they know. Give them access to being in the room. Now, don't make them do a job that isn't there. Don't have them writing your reports and writing your budgets and they ain't getting paid that. But help them see it. Seeing these things that, and y'all know what it gives. But, and Smokesky and Kenny McMorris and all these people allowing me to be in the room, that when I became an ED, it was not unknown for me to be like, oh, okay, I need to stratify this job, because I remember I would see the board in Ann's office and we were all being paid from 6 different grants. Oh, this is what I need to do for my staff, right? The more you see, the more you get access to, the more prepared you are when your opportunity comes. Shout out to Dara.
My boss.
Dara, Tommy's boss, but also Dara done been a little something to all of us over the years. Love you, Boots. Appreciate you. Those are the questions. Will Daryl log in as Daryl? Daryl's This is from our lovely facilitator. So we went through all the questions. I think the last slide, which I should have went to, was our emails and information, but we'll run that off real quick. You can email me at Dominique, DOMINIQUE at blackandpink.org, BLACAND pink.org. If social media, Instagram, all that stuff, LinkedIn is at DM56892.
And mine is simple. It's Tommy, TOMMYYD at NAP.org. Otherwise, you can find me on social media by my name, Tommy Young Dennis.
Mine is just my name, Darryl.Brown Jr. at charlesdrew.com. That's DARRYL.Brown, just like the color, JR at charlesdrew.com.
So thank you all. We appreciate you so much. Thanks to our moderator. Anytime that we can.
Before you close out, I just want to chime in really quickly. But no, I really appreciate your transparency. And I'm sure the attendees had the same sentiments because you guys are really transparent about your experiences and really honest about your experiences in healthcare and the access and the systemic challenges that people of color may face. And it's a challenge. And I think I really appreciated how you also challenge us to think about how we are kind of perpetuating some of the challenges when we think we're helping, and to us to kind of reevaluate our language and how we're really doing things. And are there policies that we have to look at within our organization that needs to change that also contributes to some of these systemic challenges? Especially in the climate that we're living in now, is more important than ever to look at how are we contributing to these kind of systemic challenges, right? That it really oppress the people of color or those who are in need of services. So I really appreciate all of what you shared. I will definitely think about that as well in terms of how we communicate our services and how, people experience, us as an organization. So I thank you for kind of showing us how we need to kind of look at ourselves and how we work. So thank you for.
And I always give high appreciation for the labor of Black women. Thank you for moderating this and holding us down today. And I'm sure you do. I'm sure you're doing buku sessions. So thank you. We appreciate you, love, because that's just what it gives. Super important. Thank you.
So we'll be in touch. And so for those attendees, please hang on that when we end this webinar, you will be prompted to complete a survey. So please fill out the survey, give us your feedback on your experience of this webinar. If you have questions specific to this webinar, always reach out to cheetah.org and ask your questions. If they're specific to our presenters, we can forward them all those questions you may have. If you think of something after this webinar, we will be sure to send them your way.
Y'all want to book us to come do this webinar at your organization, love? Hit that line. Listen. If you got a coin, I said book, not invite us at no time. I said book.
We have a question that came in. This was just what I needed at this time. Very affirming. Thank you all for your amazing work. So yeah. All right, guys. So we're going to end. Respect your time. It's 2:32. Thank you for attending. Thank you, presenters. We will be in touch.
Thank you,
everyone.